Public schools in Australia are being underfunded by about $6.6 billion, according to a report from the Centre for Future Work. The report says a 15% increase in public school funding is needed to reach the minimum levels recommended by the Gonski review a decade ago. Private schools have already reached their funding targets. For more, I'm joined by report author Dr. Jim Stanford. Good morning, Dr. Stanford. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Catherine.
So we hear that number, $6.6 billion that the system is underfunded by. How did you arrive at that number?
Well, we look at how much public schools currently receive in funding, largely from the state governments, but also the Commonwealth and other sources of funding. That's about $44 billion a year at present. Then you compare that to the amount that would be required to meet that school resource standard that was established a decade ago following the whole Gonski process. And that standard was aimed at making sure at least 80% of students, no matter what their economic background or family circumstance, could reach minimum standards for numeracy and literacy. And it comes out that we're about $6.6 billion short. So we agreed to that standard a decade ago, but really we've spent years continuing to argue about it instead of actually doing it.
So what impact is this shortfall of $6.6 billion having on students?
Catherine, we're seeing some very worrisome signs about student achievement in Australia in recent years. For example, since 2017, average school completion rates, the share of students who finish high school, have been falling gradually. And then in 2022, the most recent data, they fell by quite a large amount, very worrisome. We had those results last week from the NAPLAN survey, which showed that about a third of students are falling below expectations for basic numeracy and literacy. We've also seen Australia's performance in scholastic achievement falling relative to other industrial countries. So I think the body of evidence showing that students are not having their needs met by our system today is quite convincing. And what we've done is gone through and estimate the economic benefits to Australia if, in fact, we supported students to do better in school.
Well, I will ask you about those economic benefits in just a moment, but I did want to check in with if this underfunding is impacting students equally, or is it being felt perhaps by different socioeconomic areas more hardly?
Oh, that's a very important point, Catherine. The public school system, of course, in a way is the universal system that is meant to be accessible to everyone. No matter what region you live in, even if you're in a rural or remote region, no matter what your income background is, especially important for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander students to have access to education. These are the folks whose families are never going to be able to send their kids to private schools, which, by the way, are funded above that SRS standard. So it's especially important for students from any disadvantaged background that public schools are available and well-resourced and able to do the job that those students deserve.
So this $6.6 billion, where would the money be spent and how would it increase school completion rates?
Well, there's a whole range of different supports and resources and improvements that could be funded with the additional funding up to that SRS standard. And the SRS standard was not picked out of the air. It was determined carefully by education experts who said these are the sorts of supports that we need to ensure that 80% of students can meet minimum thresholds. And that's not a utopian goal either. If you look at what other industrial countries are doing in Europe or in Asia, they're doing much better than having 80% of students meet that minimum. So this is not a pie-in-the-sky ideal. This was carefully determined by education experts. The additional resources would go to everything, to more teachers, to more resources, to better facilities, to updating and constantly improving curriculum. Particularly important would be resources for specialists and support people to help students who are having problems learning. That's where the public school system is really underfunded, and where those types of supports are vital to help students who are having trouble help them finish high school and then go on to a better life as a result.
Just in conclusion, Dr. Stanford, let's go to those economic benefits that you mentioned earlier. What would they be with respect to the productivity of the economy?
We identified 3 separate streams of economic benefits that arise from having better schools and more students completing school. Number 1, you've obviously got more economic activity and jobs and spin-off effects from a bigger school system. Number 2, when those students finish school, you get a more educated, on average, workforce, and that leads to better employability, higher earnings, higher productivity. Number 3, the international evidence is clear that governments save big time on health costs, income supports, costs for the criminal justice system, and other public programs when the population is better educated. So put all those 3 things together, we estimated that the economic benefits of matching that SRS funding level would be 2 to 4 times greater than the cost of bringing public schools up to that standard. So it really should be seen as an investment more than just an expense.
Dr. Jim Stanford, it's been great speaking with you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Catherine.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoy our videos, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell button to get notified when we publish a new one. See you next time.